Welcome. We're on number 4 of a series that we're doing on emotions. Probably one of the most important things we'll do, but I say that about every series that I do. It's one of the most important things we'll ever do. But emotions are, because they're very, very powerful. It's a very powerful force. It's where we get the word for motion, emotion. It is actually the driving force for the actions that we do. It's the driving force for how we behave in circumstance and situation. So they're very, very important, and they're very, very powerful. We talked from the very get-go that emotions are actually part of our divine makeup. You say, how do you know? Because God has them. God has all the emotions that we have. God is love, God has anger, God is jealous, God can be compassionate, God can be merciful, God can be forgiving, and all of these emotions are given to us also, or likewise. They're very, very powerful. We talked about how that our emotions are truly the spice of life. It's like cooking a meal. There are so many variations that you can put in that meal based upon the ingredients that you include in it or contribute to it. So in that meal you can put different spices. People like it hot, people like it this way, people like it that way. And so you can change the meal, the flavor of the meal, simply by adding the spices to it. Well, our emotions are the same. We have so many emotion, or certainly main emotions with attributes off of it. You know, anger may not be outworking, but it can be condescending, it can be begrudging, it can be withholding, it can be, it can show itself in many other different forms, but they're all emotions. So there's a whole spectrum of emotions, as I showed you here, with all these emotions here, and the multiplicity of those again. So it's like the spice of life. And, you know, we pick our emotions. You can actually determine how to use emotions, and this is going to fly in the face of psychology and philosophy today, because a lot of people think that you're not responsible for your emotions. And yet we read over in the book of Deuteronomy in the 26th chapter how that God held them responsible. In verse 47, I think it was 45 through 47, God held the children of Israel responsible because they didn't serve the Lord their God with gladness of heart. Now, they did serve him, but they served him with a sulky face. They murmured over it, and God held them accountable for it. Now listen, God will not hold you accountable for something you've no control of. And so if God holds you accountable for your attitude in the manner in which you serve him or approach him or whatever, the Bible says, come into his presence with thanksgiving. Come into his courts with praise. It didn't say come into his courts murmuring and complaining. And we know what God thinks about that, because he was fed up to hear with the children of Israel in the wilderness because of their constant murmuring and bickering. And we have to understand we are, can be, should be in control of emotions. Now, we said that the best of life is emotion. I mean, what would life be if you couldn't laugh and have expectation, anticipation, and joy and happiness, all of those things? Life would be just boring. It would be just monotonous. And so, you know, the best of life is emotion. The worst of life is emotion. So they're great, but they've got to be used right. And if they're used right, even though we do go through tough times and there is grief, but there's a time for grieving, but there's a time for laughing, there's a time for sadness and a time for gladness. And you've got to realize that they're there to express ourselves, but they're not there to control us. We should be in control of emotion, not emotion in control of us. And some people in the day we live have the philosophy that I have no control over it. It's just the way I am. I can't help it. That's not true. You can help it. We talked about this individual here. We took a horse, and I asked you, you know, we talked about the power of these creatures and how wonderful they are and how we use them. And I asked you, did any of you ever bareback ride a horse? It's a frightening thing. when they take off. When you give them their head and they take off, you're not in control of that beast. You're just along for the ride. However, if you understand and get a bit of knowledge about this creature, you can put a bridle on it and a bit in its mouth, and that same beast will serve you well, because you're in control of his head. And you know that about a horse. If you control his head, you control the horse. If it wants to rear up, you put a chest band on it and you hold its head down so it can't rear up. Or if it wants to lie down and roll, which sometimes horses do to get you off, you pull his head back up, and he only goes where his head goes. His head has to go there first. With that bit of knowledge, you can take that creature and use it wonderfully to serve you. But here's the deal. Without knowledge and without a bridle, you're just along for the ride. And here's the deal. This is the truth. Emotions are the same way. Without knowledge and understanding, your emotions will take you wherever they want to, for as long as they want to wherever they want to. And you're just along for the ride. And sometimes it can be a frightening experience and whatever. And it's just a bit of knowledge and understanding. The Bible teaches us we can bridle them and take our emotions in control the way they're supposed to be and use them correctly. They are powerful things. Powerful. Your emotions are God-given. That's what as I said, emotion. They're the elements that we have that stimulate us to act. For love or for anger, for hope or for whatever it is. They actually motivate us to action. It's what gets us to act. Emotion. And we got to understand how they work. So over the last few weeks, I took up this scenario here. I took up the soul, this middle one, the red one. And the soul is made up of three components: the mind, will, and the emotion. The mind is where we get information and understanding. And we get that emotion or that information from both spiritual and physical arenas, if you're a born-again believer. If you're not a born-again believer, you're only going to get it from one arena, which is your physical five senses. But your mind is where we gain knowledge and understanding. That part of our mind, for taking in information, the Bible tells us we're to renew our thinking. We're to renew our mind and update our knowledge. So when you get born again, one of the first things you got to do is get into the Word of God, because that part of our soul has got to be updated. We got to download the new information of the new birth experience and what's been given to us in Christ Jesus. That's a process. It comes over time. You go from infancy to maturity, but it is all dependent on this renewing process. Taking off the old man, putting on the new man. That's part of the soul, is called the mind. And it has to be renewed. It's where knowledge and information is stored. The other part of the soul is the will. The will is where you now decide what to do with the knowledge and the understanding and the information that you're getting. You process the information, you process the knowledge, and in the will is where your reasoning goes on, where you rationalize what you have just learned, what you have just taken in, what you understand, and you make a decision out of that rationale. Once you make a decision, and the most powerful aspect of our makeup is our will. You can choose to go to heaven and spend your eternity with God. You can choose to go to hell. And God can't override that. It is so powerful. The devil can't nobody can override your will. It's yours. It's mine. And the will is where we make decisions based upon our rationale, upon the information and the knowledge which is stored where? Where do you store knowledge in the mind? All right? So you have the mind and the will. Once you make the will here, the Bible tells us that you've got to disciple your will. That's how you do that. And each one of them is a process. The first one, the mind has to be renewed. The will has to be disciplined. And each one of these are a process. And again, a lot of people, we just use the word soul in Christendom, and a lot of people can't decipher what's what. And then when you read the Bible, you think, well, is it all talking about the same? No, it's actually talking about these three aspects of the soul. Okay? One's for knowledge and information and understanding. The other is for reason, rationale, and decision making. And then once the will makes a decision based on the information, knowledge that it has, it picks an emotion, something to now express that decision that has been made in the will based upon the knowledge and understanding that you have. Still with me?
So is the emotion a reflection of what goes on with the mind?
It's not a reflection. It is a force. And you can pick whatever one you want. Like you pick an emoji. We may go through the same circumstance situation, but based on the knowledge that we have and the understanding that we have, we will pick a decision, what we're going to do in a current circumstance or situation. And then when we pick a decision, in order to act or motion that decision, we pick an emotion to do it. So that's all it's for. It's just the whole purpose of an emotion is to express the will. It is to carry out the function of the decision that you have made based upon the knowledge that you have. In that order. That's the way it works. So the less knowledge you have, the more indecisive your will be, and the less ability to pick the right emotion for it, because you just don't know what you want to express.
I'm thinking of two people. One would pick fight, and the other would pick flight.
Yep.
And, one's anger and one's fear.
Exactly. You pick an emotion. You can all respond to the same. So what we're going to get to is, a lot of people think that you have no say over the matter.
What's that? I'm sorry.
A lot of people say you have no say over the matter. I can't help it. You can help it.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. And when you actually bring these three into line, it's amazing what you can do. It's amazing what you can be. But we'll get there. So, everybody get that. So you pick an emotion, and the motion displays the expressive response of the choice that you made. Everybody with me? It's worth recapping it, because in the world in which we live, psychology and philosophy don't teach it this way. So we're used to it being taught a different way. All right? And I'll get to that hopefully tonight. So, emotions are given to serve us, not to be served. We don't serve emotion. Emotions serve us. They're not in control of us. We are in control of them. They are part of the soul. They're something that we choose, and there are many to choose from, that we choose to express the decision that we have made in our will based upon the information that we have in our mind. But we pick them. We are responsible for them. That's why God, in the book of Deuteronomy 28 and verse 47, held them responsible for their attitude. We went through several scriptures last week. Jesus told the disciples in Matthew 16, "Let not your heart be troubled." That's a choice. Make the choice. You choose based on the information, and here's the emotion. Don't choose trouble. He tells you what to do. He tells them what to do. Paul said, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. And then he goes on to say, be anxious for nothing, but by prayer and supplication. Don't be worrying. Jesus said, stop worrying about what to put on, what to wear, what to eat. God will take care of that. You just seek first the kingdom of God. So he implores us to pick the right emotions, because they're very powerful. Thing about it is, if you're not in control of the emotion, then you're just along for the ride. And it'll take you where you don't want to go for maybe longer than you want to be there. You're just not there. So, emotions are not a byproduct of circumstance and situation, but are calculated response of expression to them. This is something else we need to understand. Our emotions, because in today's culture, we teach people, I'm the way I am because of my emotions are the byproduct of what happened to me. Now, I'm not saying things that happen to you don't affect you, so don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying you're immune to what happens to you, and that there's not something that needs to be done or harnessed or changed or whatever. What I am saying is this idea that I'm not responsible for the way I am is not true. We can be responsible for the way we are, and we can fix it. And God has a way to fix this stuff, whereas psychology and psychiatry doesn't have a way to fix it. It can help, but it doesn't have a way to deliver you from, because it's not thinking how this works. The Bible tells us how this thing works. Does somebody just want to read for me Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 12? Because the only manuscript we have, the only tool that we have to be able to decipher what's going on up here in the mind is the Word of God. There is not another instruction manual out there that deals with this. And I have talked to psychiatrists and I have talked to psychologists over the years of ministry where I've gone to visit people or people that needed our help, and they weren't open to me really being there because of their idea of my approach to the whole thing. They didn't think they didn't really want me to undo what they were doing. Which
scientific enough.
It wasn't scientific enough, and their solution to a lot of emotional problems are to medicate them. And all that does is it just dulls the response system. That's all it's doing. It's pacifying, but it's not helping them to control it. It is just numbing the thing down. Now, for some that helps, so don't get me wrong, and I'm not knocking people that get help from that arena. Thank God for it. Thank God for all medicines and all it does. Thank God for the doctor. But we also have a great physician. Thank God for what medicine can do. But when medicine runs out of what medicine can do, thank God for the great healer as well. So God wants us to, avail of the commonsensical things we have, but when they contradict the ability to be delivered completely or free from stuff, let's move on, because those other things help, but they don't set free. These are spiritual issues, really. So, emotions are not a byproduct of circumstance and situation, but are our calculated response and expression to them. We are responsible for our emotions. And again, yes, sir.
But it is normal to have an emotion like in grief. Somebody passes away, or a loved one gets in a very dire situation. I mean,
Sure.
You're going to have a little bit of fear and concern.
Sure.
But then we have the ability to harness that through our knowledge and through the Word of God to be able to align it to lower that emotion and harness it.
Just harness it.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with being concerned. Concern will make you do something. And when you come to the end of your thread or the end of your rope and you say, that's enough, that emotion will get you up off your chair to go do something. I've had it up to here. I'm going to do something. It's an emotion. There's nothing wrong with that emotion, because it causes us to act. But you gotta, because it's such a powerful thing, because love will make you do things that, it's amazing what people do for love. It's amazing how, anyway. So, everybody with me so far? All right. So, here's how it works. The mind gets information from the spirit and the body. So you're getting information from these two worlds, your five senses and your spiritual. Unless, of course, you're not born again, then you're not getting any information from there, because you're dead in your spirit, so to speak, to that other input from God. Sorry, I forgot to read Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. Does somebody want to read that for me?
For the Word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart.
There's nothing can get in there and sort out what is mind, will, and emotion. When you study it from external forces, from five senses, you're studying it from the physical response, what you're seeing. Yes, sir.
Just a question back on that verse. I never understood. I understand the two-edged sword piercing between the soul and the spirit, but why does it say of both joints and marrow?
And your physiology.
Okay, so the Word of God how's it's dividing our physiology?
It is the ability to tell whether what you're doing, what you are, how you respond to life, is where the motivation is coming from. Is it coming from your spirit, from your soul, or from your physiology? Say, oh, I did that, honestly, I did that for God. And God's saying, no, you didn't. You did that because you want to look right in the pastor's eyes and you want to get promoted or you want to take over things. But you say, no, I'm serving God with all my heart. And the Word of God's saying, no, you know rightly well that's not what you're doing. Or I'm going to give and I want everybody to see what I'm giving because I love the Lord with all my heart. And everyone says, oh, that was absolutely wonderful. Say, yeah, it was nothing. And God's going, you're right, it was nothing. Because your motive was wrong. And how do we know how can you discern the difference between when somebody is right or wrong, or when somebody does ask the Lord to be the master of their life or not? You and I can't tell that, but the Word of God can. It gets in there like a scalpel. As I said to you before, I think in one of the other classes we did with the men's group, if I went in for a surgeon, the surgeon was, I had appendicitis or some operation like that, and I saw the surgeon coming in, and he starts up a chainsaw. Boom! He goes, I can sort this out in 5 minutes. I'm thinking, not on me, you're not sorting it out. By the time you finish butchering me, it'll take, No, I want to see a guy coming in with the smallest, skinniest little thing that says, you won't even know I was there. So you understand? And so, the Word of God is that precise. It tells the difference between what is spirit, what is soul or emotional, or what is physical, where it's all. And then it goes on to talk about the motivations and the intentions of the heart. That's what he's talking about. It can tell. It can tell what stimulated, motivated, activated that action. So you do it in your physiology, and you say, there you are. And he goes, no, but I know what motivated that. I know whether it was your spirit that did it, your newborn spirit, motivating you to serve God in a certain way, or whether it was your soul, something that was telling you, or you're picking an emotion because you wanted to be praised, or you wanted to be seen, or you wanted some accolade, or whatever it was. So there's nothing can break humanity apart like the Word of God. It's the instruction manual. And so when we go to other sciences, they're going to study man from external observations. But this one goes right down into the working processes of how we're made and what each part is made for. Still with me? So, this is how it works. Information from the spirit and the body, it goes over, and the will, which we discipline, makes a choice of decision based on this. So the more information you have, or as again in one of the lessons I did with the guys, the more your GPS is updated, the easier it is for God to direct you and encourage you to make the right decision. When the decision is made, you then pick an emotion to act out in your physiology, to act out the will, the decision you made. And there's a multitude of emotions to pick. But when you pick that emotion, you picked it and you're in control of it. Or whether you realize it or not, you're not serving it. It was meant and given to serve you. It's very important that we understand that. Emotions are here to serve me. My job is to pick whatever one I need. And yes, grieve if you have to grieve. If concern comes, then have the concern for all the right reasons of being concerned. Need to sort it, get it fixed, whatever. But harness it so that you're in control of it. And the power of it will help you achieve and accomplish stuff. But if you don't harness it, these things, you start to think that you have no control over them. And then they start to take you on trips that you don't want to go on. So emotions are given to serve us, not to be served. Very important that you understand that. Also, emotion, and that's what it is, emotion, stimulate to action the choices we make based upon the information that we have. So the more information we have, the better it is the decision we make, and the easier it is to pick an emotion to express that will that we've just made. Okay? So it's very, very important. That's the sequence of events. Emotions under control are the expression of the will. That's what they're for. That's what they do. That's why they were given. To motion us into fulfill the decision of the will. Emotions out of control become influences of the will. That's where the problem is. When emotion is not being controlled by the understanding or the knowledge that you have in your mind, and your emotions now are out of control, they start to affect your will. And you start making emotional decisions. And a lot of people have made a lot of mistakes following their emotions when they make decisions. And so now an emotion out of control will influence your decision making. And that's when the problems start. You're into that cycle of the emotion motivates the will, and the will makes a decision and feeds the emotion. And now you're in this vicious cycle where instead of your understanding and knowledge influencing your decision, you're now governed by your emotions. So the thing about your emotions is you're up one day, you can be down the next. They can be your best day, they can be your worst day. So emotions, very powerful, but you've got to understand what they're for and where they come in the sequence. And as much in all as you have them, they're not there to influence your will, but they're there to exercise the expression of your will. Still with me?
So
Now,
that's why we don't make quick decisions on things, because we're acting out of our emotions,
Yeah.
as opposed to stepping back, breathing, all
Yes.
that, and then just saying 24 hours later, okay, that's it.
yeah. Jesus didn't react, he responded. There's a big difference between reacting and responding. Responding means you, based upon knowledge and understanding, you make a decision to respond to the circumstance, situation, or the environment that you find yourself in. Reaction is where there's no thought went into it. The emotion of the moment caused you to do something. You picked an emotion for it. Now, I'm not talking about running or whatever, those immediacies like for protection or whatever, fear that makes you run. I mean, they're all good. But you understand what I'm saying. There's times when you just need to be slow to speak and just listen. And we'll get to a few verses that'll magnify it. Uncontrolled emotions are where sin is conceived. And I'm reiterating a lot of it. I know some of you, we did this last week, but I'm reiterating it for those maybe that try to get this last week and the sound didn't work. So I want to build a picture, because there's no point us doing it if people aren't learning, and we need the recap as well. All right? All still with me? So we talked about emotion is where sin is conceived. And I brought this up here. Every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own desires. This is the weakness. When your desire, your emotion, then becomes enticed, and then you conceive stuff in your emotions. Your emotions then conceive and bring forth sin, and then sin, if it has its way with your will, or if your emotion drives your will, it'll cause you to follow your emotion instead of follow the Word of God. So sin is conceived in the emotion. That's where sin, that's where the weak link is. Sin is conceived in the emotion. I want it, I gotta have it, need to have it, I'm angry, I love it, and most of what people do, the crimes that people commit, the problems that people are all stem out of the emotion. That's why it's so important to harness it, because if you're going to harness it, then sin doesn't get in. And you start to live your life based on knowledge and understanding, rationale that is based on that understanding makes your choices, and then you pick an emotion to express that decision.
But can't you overthink something to the point of rationalizing what is really a bad decision?
But that's the whole. That's the result of experience. I think you talked last week about putting your hand on the fire,
Right.
and you burn your hand. And you say, well, that's the way you learned it. The way I'm going to learn it is I'm going to look at your burnt hand and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not that stupid. And so you made a wrong decision. I made a better decision. I decided to go on your experience and not do it. So you understand what I'm saying. So we all make.
At the same time, what about the situation where the person knows that, but they do it anyway?
Well, they're more than stupid. I mean, if you already told them that it's that, and then you go and put your hand on it, I mean, then how stupid can you get? I mean, there's, stupid gone to seed. So, sin is emotional. Sin is illogical. I think I put 2 L's in there and I should have put 1. I'm just after seeing it when I looked down. Is it I-L or is it I-L-L? I-L-L? Yeah. Yes, okay. If I had been another way, I would have said it was the Irish version of it. And when I say illogical, sin is illogical because sometimes we do the most illogical things because of emotion, passion, greed, envy, anger. And there's no logic to it. Some people will throw away a career or a reputation or a business or a marriage or whatever, and for the stupidest of emotions, lose everything. Lose their position, lose their family, lose their... just wrong. It's not logical. If they thought about it longer, they would never have done it. If they thought about the consequence of what would happen for doing or entering or achieving, or they would never have done it because it wasn't worth it. So why did you do it if it wasn't worth it? Because sin is not logical. It is illogical because sin is conceived in the emotion. That's where you birth it. Does that make sense? All right. So, sin isn't smart. Adam wasn't smart when he ate of the tree. He knew better, but he didn't. She saw the tree. She felt that it was good to eat and for this purpose. And it was all external, and her emotions made her go that way. And then he had a choice between what God said and what she said, and he picked her. And then blamed God and her for the whole thing. And illogical, it's not smart. Sin's not smart. Okay, now, Mark the 4th chapter. It says this. And I wrote there, emotions influencing the will and overriding the mind. Again, you understand what the will is and you understand what the mind is. The mind is where you put your knowledge and information. So he's talking about the sower sowing the seed. And then he gets down to this part and he says, and these are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word. So they have it in their understanding, they have it in their knowledge, they're putting it in their mind, so they've got everything to make a decision from. You still with me? They're reading what the word says, the seed's been sown, it's starting to grow up in the mind and the understanding, and as it's growing with the view to the mind, with the view to influencing the will, look what else grows up. But the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches and the lust for other things entering in. Now how do they enter in? Emotions. They're coming in from another arena. And he knows what the word says. I mean, she's read what it tells to do. We have that understanding and knowledge. It's supposed to influence our decision, but now something starts to grow up among all of that, which is, and these are emotions, cares, deceitfulnesses, and lusts, or desires, or passions. And once it comes in, because that's where the Bible says sin enters in when a man is enticed by his own emotion. And emotions out of control will allow this stuff to come in, and it entering in, it chokes the word, which is the mind that's trying to influence the decision, and all of a sudden what you've been learning, read, understood, is not fruitful anymore. Because it's not governing the decisions that the emotion is. Still with me? All right. Let me show you this in action. This is 1 Samuel chapter 30. This is a great story about David. David has been on the run from Saul, King Saul, and he's been hiding with the 600 renegades in a city called Ziklag. It was their city. They built it, and their wives and kids and all of their possessions are in Ziklag. So it says here in 1 Samuel 30 and verse 1, and it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day. They had been out on an escapade. And so when they came back, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, which was their home, and smitten Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. In other words, they burnt the city and they took everything, including their families, their kids, their wives, and all that was valuable. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. Response. What do you do?
Revenge.
A lot of different things. I mean, how angry would you be? How distressed would you be? How sorrowful would you be? Well, let's read on. Verse 4. And David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice, and they wept until they had no more power to weep. I'll tell you, there's an emotion. I mean, they just cannot grieve anymore. I mean, they're out of tears. And David's two wives were taken captive, Ahinoam and the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed. He had an emotion. He felt like the rest of them. Greatly distressed. But here's another reason he was very distressed. He was distressed for the people spake of stoning him. I mean, how many of you know when everything goes south, you blame the leader? Let's kill the leader. It's his fault. It's just what you do. David was greatly distressed, for they spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters, but David. David did something that the rest didn't do. He encouraged himself in the Lord his God. He went for the information in the mind. He went for the understanding, and he went for the knowledge. Yes, he's facing a situation. He's in the middle of a circumstance. He's in the middle of an environment that is drawing all this emotion. And he could have easily let it take over, but he didn't. He stopped, and like you said, Michelle, he, instead of reacting, he thinks for a minute. He responds. They're all planning now. They don't know what to do with their emotions. They're totally out of control. Now they're going to kill him. But he, unlike the rest of them, he starts to go back to the mind, what he has learned about, what he knows about, what he understands about God. He starts to bring that to the decision-making faculty of his soul to respond correctly, instead of letting his emotion run everything. It says he encouraged himself. He had to do it himself in the Lord. So he goes to a place in his soul for this. And David said unto Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. The ephod was yes and no, two stones. And they cast them like dice. It was either yes, yes, no, no, or yes, no. And if it was yes, no, you make the decision. If it was no, no, God said no. If it was yes, yes, God said yes. That's the way they did it. All right? And that's a whole other... All right. So,
Logics class.
a very, very mathematically sound. No, no, don't do it. No, yes. Make your own mind up. And yes, yes.
It was like an 8-ball that we had.
Yeah, was that? And except it was only, again, God was having to deal with them externally. It was the only way God could deal with these people externally about decisions, especially decisions that had to be made on the cuff, at the moment. So, it says, and David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop, or after these armies that took our families? Shall I overtake them? And he answered, pursue, and thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. Now, if you read the rest of the story, David and his 600 men planned to go after them, and of course 200 of them were exhausted from the last escapade, and then from all the bawling that they went through because they lost all the family. So there was only 400 of them battle ready, and then they went off and they found them, and they totally defeated the other crowd, got all of their families back, didn't lose one animal, didn't lose any of their children, any of their wives, and brought the whole lot back. But I wrote this down in the bottom because a lot of people don't understand this. It was only a matter of a few weeks, it wasn't even 2 weeks, when Saul and Jonathan, the fella he was been running from all the time that was trying to kill him, was killed in battle, and David became the king of Israel. Can you imagine what would have happened to this man if he had have run with the emotional aspect of what went on in that environment they were in? He might never have become king. He might have lost it, and the guys might have stoned him, and so on and so forth. But he stopped, he went back to his understanding, to his knowledge, to his mind, to his awareness of what God's done and God has said, and he brought that to the fore, and he harnessed the emotion, and he made a decision, and harnessed all that anger, all that hurt, all that grieving, all that, he harnessed it, and he drove 400 of them down the street, and they beat the daylights out of the people who caused the problem in the first place. I mean, that's a lot of emotion, but it was totally harnessed. Powerful. Here's another one. I don't know if you're aware of this story, but a very interesting story, and it starts over here in 2 Kings in chapter 4 and verse 23. Let me explain the story. You can do the reading yourself, but a beautiful story. This is a Shunammite woman, and what has happened is Elisha would pass by her house so many times a year, going to, in his to and fro and doing his business as a prophet. And as Elisha would pass, the Shunammite lady would honor him and have him come in, and she'd make him a meal. So she gets to thinking, and she talks to her husband, because they're prospering, because they're ministering to the man of God. And their business is doing great. And so she says, we need to build something on the side of the house so that when the prophet comes, we're not just giving him a meal, but maybe stop over for the weekend or just be here at our house, because we're blessed. Because we minister to him and we're just getting blessed for doing it. So they built a cabin connected to the house, a prophet's chamber. And so every time Elisha came past, he stayed there. He pulled in there, and they created food for him and everything. Well, he enjoyed their company and what they did, and he went on and did his business. But that went on for a while, and eventually Elisha turns around and says to Gehazi, his sidekick, he said, this woman has been such a blessing. This family have blessed us so much. Go ask them is there anything I can do for them? Is there anything I can ask God for them? Because they're just so good to me. And Gehazi said, I do know this, they don't have any kids, because he is older than she, and they're not having any kids. He says, okay, tell her to come up. So he comes up and he says, let me tell you, because of your blessing me, that by this time next year you'll be holding a baby boy in your arms. So she stops him and she goes, no, hold on. Don't you start telling me stuff that's not going to happen and building my hopes up and winding me up, making me believe something that's not true. He says, you'll have a son this time next year. He goes, well, okay, I'm holding you to it, but don't be telling me something to break my heart. And he goes, I'm telling you. Well, lo and behold, that time next year, she had a baby boy. So they prosper. I mean, they're farmers, and they just wholly and solely prosper. As the lad grows up, if you read the story in chapter 4, they're out in the fields one day, and the child gets a headache. He's a young lad. He gets a headache. And the headache becomes so bad, he dies. Probably an aneurysm or something. But it says he just got a headache. And he died. And she picked up the boy, and she carried him to the bed of Elisha's room, and put the child on the bed. And then she went to close the door, and then she went out to her husband and said, can you get me the fastest donkey that we have, and the fastest donkey driver that we have? I've got to go find the prophet. And he goes, is everything okay? And she says, everything's fine. He says, okay, but be careful. He says, no problem. So they're galloping away as fast as you can go. It's not horsepower, it's donkey power, but as fast as they can go. And as Elisha and Gehazi see her coming, when she does catch up with them, Elisha looks at what's going on and he thinks, there's something wrong here. That donkey is flat out. Foot and pedal to the metal. I mean, here it comes. He says, you better run out there and find out what's going on, because I have no idea what's coming. So eventually Gehazi gets out there to her and says, what's the problem? And she goes, nothing, everything's fine. He says, oh, okay, come on, he's up here. So when they arrive, she gets down at the prophet's feet and she grabs him by the feet, and he goes, how's things? And she goes, everything's fine. And he goes, I perceive that it's not. There's something wrong. She says, you give me a son. Do you remember I told you, don't you give me a son that was going to break my heart? He goes, yeah, I do. So well, he's lying back there in your bed, and he ain't sucking oxygen, and you're breaking my heart. And so Gehazi tells Gehazi, take my staff, and you run, and don't stop, and don't talk to anybody, and put that staff on that child. And she says, don't send him. I'm not leaving you. Either you go or nobody goes. He says to Gehazi, you go. And he ran off ahead. She takes and goes with Elisha back to the house. And you know the story. He lies on the child. And then he goes back down and he goes up again. And he lies face to face on the child on the bed. And eventually the child sneezes 7 times and comes back to life. All right? But this lady, can you imagine the emotion of all of this? Well, I put 3 verses in here. In this part here where she finds out that the child's dead. And the husband said, and he said, wherefore wilt thou go to him today? Or why do you want a donkey to go off to find the prophet? Wherefore wilt thou go today? It's neither new moon nor Sabbath. I mean, is there something special on that I missed? Is there a gift you got to give him? Is there something you got to do? And she says, no, it shall be well. Now, the father doesn't know that the son's laying on the bed, stone dead. But she's in control. She's harnessed her emotion because she has knowledge and understanding. She's made a decision and she's holding the reins of emotion. So when they get there to him in verse 26, run now, Elisha says, run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, is it well with thee? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your son? And she answered, yep, it's well. And when she came to the man of God, to the hill, she caught him by the feet, but Gehazi came near to pull her away, and the man of God said, leave her alone. Her soul is vexed within her. I mean, for a woman that was saying all is well, she is really upset. He knows it. But boy, is she in control of her emotions right now. She's dictating where this thing goes. And I want to tell you this. When you understand what's going on, you can win or lose a battle just by your response to the circumstance you're in. You really can. You can submit to it and lose right there, depending on how you respond to the circumstance you're facing. And a lot of it's not denial. A lot of it is because a lot of times you go down this line of Christendom that don't understand what's going on, and it seems like name it and claim it. And for some, that's really all it is, or blab it and grab it, or whatever terminology you want to put on it. All right? Because now some people don't understand what's going on, and so they think by just saying positive words, that's what's going to happen. But it's deeper than that. I'm telling you what's going on. It's knowledge and understanding that is taking control of the decision, which is harnessing an emotion which is powerful and is in full control of the circumstance and the situation and the environment that they're in. They're in control. They're not being controlled by the environment. They're not being controlled by the situation. They're not being controlled by whatever. They're in control of it, even though it looks like everything outside, externally, is out of their control. You still with me? Jesus did this all the time. All the time. When they want to throw him off the precipice, or when the boat was sinking and he's asleep on the boat, they're all panicking. I mean, these are fishermen. They fish that lake all of their lives. And then they wake him up and say, do you not care that we're all going to die? I mean, come on, guys. You know, Jesus wasn't worried about it because he had a job to do, and this was not the way it was going to end. He was in control of the circumstance. So he was able to speak to it. He was able to dictate to it. He was able to change it, because knowledge and understanding and the will and the emotion put you in control of the circumstance, situation, and the environment. You still with me? All right. So, it sounds like when she says it is well, and some people read that and they think, I'm just going to keep saying it is well. So, hey, your house is on fire. Oh, it's well. You need to phone the fire brigade. No, it's well. I would phone the fire brigade if I were you, and you know what I'm saying. I mean, we can act unsensical at sometimes. And that's not what it is. It's not a positive confession. It is knowledge and understanding, a decision, and then the harnessing of an emotion to take you where your decision and your knowledge wants to take you. Still with me? Okay. Here's David. Now, he made a great decision the last time. Here's another one now. He doesn't do so well. Came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go to battle. Kings went to battle in the good weather. And you went to battle to extend your borders and secure your borders. And there was a season for battle, and there was a season when you didn't battle. So there was a particular time here in 2 Samuel 11. It says, and it came to pass, the year expired, at the time when the kings go forth to battle, and David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David, he didn't go to battle. David stayed home, and he tarried at Jerusalem. But all his men were elsewhere. They were all doing the fighting. He was probably the only fella back in Jerusalem. I don't know what sort of mood he was in, or where he ended up, or where he got himself. But he shouldn't have been there. He should have been doing something else. But he now finds himself not at the battle where he should be, leading his men. He sent them out, and now he's at home. It says, and it came to pass in the evening that David arose off his bed. Well, he should have been going to bed in the evening. Obviously, he was sleeping late and getting up in the afternoon type of thing. He's nothing to get up for. And he's in one of those, I don't know what he's just not where he should be. So he gets up out of his bed in the afternoon or whatever, and walked up on the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon, and David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, is not this Bathsheba? Well, you know the rest of the story. You say, well, it was her fault. She was out there washing on the roof. She probably thought all the men were gone to war. But David didn't. David was getting up in the afternoon, and he shouldn't have been there, and so on and so forth. But you know the story, he gives into it. And as a result, his emotion spawns the sin, which spawns a murder and all of the other stuff that goes with it. You just have to be in control of these emotions. And they can come from different arenas, but you've got to harness every one of them. It says this of Abraham. It says in Romans 4:17, speaking of Abraham. Abraham is 20 odd years now. He has been told he was going to have a child, and he made all sorts of mistakes with Hagar and whatever, and he's still learning. But here's what it says. It says of Abraham, as it is written, he's reciting this is the knowledge and information he has in his mind. As it is written, I have made thee the father of many nations. This is what God had promised him in Genesis 12. Before him whom he believed, even God, who quickeneth the dead and calls those things that be not as though they were. Abraham is arriving at a place in life, decades on, with experience, that God has this way of calling things that aren't like they is. And he gets it. He now gets it. He's 25 years down the street after being promised that he'd be the father of a multitude. He's 100 years of age and she's 90, and he gets it. He now has the knowledge and the understanding. He now makes a decision based on that, knowing that God calls things that be not as though they were. He now believes it. He makes a decision based upon it, and he controls and harnesses his will and emotions based upon it. And it goes on to say, who against hope, here's the emotion, he believed in hope, that he might become the father of many nations. So he now takes hope as an emotion, and he harnesses it. According to that which was spoken, so shall thy seed be. And be not weak in faith. He considered not his body, now his own body, now dead, when he was about 100 years old, neither the deadness of Sarah's womb. If you read this in the Greek, it says he did consider it. He considered himself being 100, her being 90, but he didn't take their condition into consideration when it came to what he understood about God. Does that make sense? So you say that he ignored them? No, he didn't ignore their condition, but he didn't consider it as being able to stop what God had said to him, because now he got it. So he's processing the knowledge and understanding, he makes a decision, he harnesses hope, and he drives it to the manifestation. So he goes on to say, be not weak in faith, he considered now his body now dead, his own body now dead, when he was about 100 years old, neither the deadness of Sarah's womb. He staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God. Mind, will, emotion. He got him there. Acts 16:23. Paul and Silas. They're taken in, beaten to a pulp by the Sanhedrin, and then they're dismissed down into the lower dungeon by the rulers. And when they had laid many stripes upon them, they cast them into prison. I said Sanhedrin, it wasn't them that did it, it was the leaders of the city. But anyway, casting them into the prison, charging the jailer to keep them safely, who having received such a charge, he thrust them into the inner prison, and he made their feet fast in the stocks. Now, they're in the dingy dungeon. It's not like, prison today where you got pool table and a library and, and all of the stuff you get to go in your gymnasium or whatever. These guys have their back wide open with the beating that they got. They're lying on their back with their feet up in stocks. And it says here, and at midnight, Paul and Silas harnessed their emotion based upon their will, their understanding and their will, and they decided that they were going to not let the environment dictate what to do, but they were going to do something, grab an emotion based on knowledge and understanding and choice. They prayed and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. So they weren't whispering, they were singing. Full blown, singing away. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so the foundations of the prison were shaken. Immediately the doors were open and everyone's bands were loose. You know the story. They weren't being dictated to by their environment. They weren't being dictated to by their situation. They weren't being dictated to by their situation. They were dictating to their environment. It says of Jesus over in Hebrews chapter 12. If somebody want to read verse 3 for me, please, just before we start to wind this down here. Hebrews 12 and verse 3. Now earlier it says to us, it says, laying aside the sin and the weight that doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that's set before us. So we got to lay some stuff aside and take a hold. And then it says, looking on to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Do you want to read that for me?
Looking only at Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart.
So what got Jesus through? What did Jesus do as he faced the cross? How did he navigate that whole environment?
The joy set before him kept his mind on the prize.
Look past it to the
So what emotion did he harness to take him through? Joy. And that joy, he went back and he remembered what the Word said in his mind. He had the understanding and the knowledge and the revelation. That became the motivator of his choice. Not my will, but thy will be done. That's the choice I've made. And then he harnessed the motivator for that choice. The motivator for it was, the emotion for it was joy. And he drove that revelation, that choice, and that emotion, and he drove right through it. It took him out the far side. We're designed that way. We're actually designed. That's how we are actually designed by God to do stuff. To be in control. Not be controlled by, but in control of. It's how it works. Peter, in Acts 12 and 6, it says, when Herod had brought him forth, the same night Peter was sleeping between two soldiers. Now Herod was going to take his head off because he took the head off of James the day before, and everybody was delighted with it, and he was very popular with the crowd, so he thought, I've got Peter as well, so I'll chop his head off in the morning. So he puts Peter in prison, and he puts a guard around him, and he's going to chop his head off in the morning. And I keep bringing this up. If you were getting your head chopped off in the morning, what would you be doing? Bawling your lamps out, probably, saying, oh God, I'm sorry, if you get me out of here, I promise I'll do this, and I promise. Well, it says here, and when Herod would have brought him forth the same night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and the keepers before the doors kept the prison. Behold, the angel of the Lord came unto him, and a light shined in the prison, and he smote Peter on the side. Why do you think he smote Peter on the side? He was fast asleep. Now, he's going to get his head chopped off in the morning. Would you sleep if you were getting your head chopped off in the morning? But Peter did. Peter had knowledge and understanding. What knowledge and understanding had Peter?
He wasn't dying.
He wasn't dying in the morning. Because when he walked on the beach with Jesus in John the 20th chapter, as he walked along that beach and Jesus said, feed my lambs and feed my sheep and whatever, and then he says, there will be a day when you are old, people will take you where you don't want to go. Remember that story? And then he said, what about John? He says, none of your business about John. You mind your own business. Do what I tell you to do. And so, not too many months later, here he is now in a prison, and Herod says, I'm going to chop your head off in the morning. And he goes, nah, you're not. I have understanding and knowledge of what I was told. I'm now going to use that from my mind to make my will. And out of that will, I'm going to grab an emotion, and that emotion is going to drive me through this thing. So he says, I just need to go sleep. I need my rest. I have a busy day tomorrow. He went to sleep. Angel had to come in, kick him in the side, drag him out of there, and open the gates and everything to get him out. This is emotion under control. It's powerful.
And that was Peter, who wasn't known for having his emotions.
His emotion was all over the shop. Psalm 34 and verse 1. I will bless the Lord. There's my choice. I will. And it's based on information. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. Here's the information. I sought the Lord and he heard me. And he's always delivered me from everything I was ever afraid of. So what am I worrying about? Just let's have a shout. And let's rejoice. Proverbs 16:32. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. Or basically, when you're in control of your emotion, you're in control. You say, oh, they're a mighty man. The mighty person is the person who knows how to control their emotions. That's a mighty person. because the power is in your mind, will, and emotion. He says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he who conquers a city. Or I wrote it down here in another version just for you to... He is more of a hero who has conquered himself than he who has taken the best fortified city. You're mighty when you can control this property. You've got to conquer this first. So I want to conquer the kingdom of darkness. Well, I'm all for it. Let's do that. But before you conquer the kingdom of darkness, you've got to conquer this kingdom first. And part of that conquering is renewing your mind with knowledge and understanding and revelation, making it affect the choices that you make, which is your will, and then harnessing the correct emotions to motivate or action you to fulfill that knowledge and choice that you've made. And if you can do that, he says you're in control. You are mighty. You are a mighty person. Not from taking the city, but being in control of your mind, will, and emotion. You're powerful. You all with me? Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison. 27 years in prison. Every day they asked him, do you want to recant? He said no. For leading rebellion against the South African government. He said, do you want to recant? No. No. You could have walked out of there any day. You could have walked out, all you had to do was say, I'm not going to be an activist anymore. I'm sorry for what I've done. I'm not against the South African government. Every day, for 27 years, they asked him, you can go home today, you can leave today, or you're out to break rocks. Do you want to go free? He said, no. I'm already free. I'm already free. They said, well, you're in prison. He goes, but I'm already free. I'm not. I'm already free. I'm free. You can be in prison and totally free. Because your circumstance is not what makes you free. Your environment is not what makes you free. Paul the Apostle was in prison for 2 years. Some of his most productive work in the several instances in prison were done in prison. He said, I'm captive, but the gospel is free. So, this, and I'll stop there, this is how you become mighty and strong and powerful. And it's not what you accumulate around you, it's what you produce from within you. We're designed by God to function this way. That's how we're designed. We miss it sometimes, but we're learning. We get it. Eventually we get it. Anyway, there's many more to talk about. Any questions on that before we wind down here and close? Did that help everybody tonight? That make sense? All right.
I think it's interesting though, last week you touched on modern day psychology and how it's so opposite of this, and you kind of went into that last week.
I actually went to go, I'm planning to go into it. I have a few, I have some of this stuff here to go through and a bunch of diagrams to talk to you about and show you how all that operates, but then that's another day. So I don't get there. I just wish I could get there, but I'm going to get there.
We're glad you're not racing.
Pardon?
We're glad you're not racing.
Yeah, you know what? Some of this is new for most people. I believe it is new for most people. Breaking down the soul is something that most Christians don't fully understand. They just don't get it. But it's not because they're ignorant or stupid. It's because nobody stops long enough to explain it. And that's what church is about. That's when I say church is supposed to teach us. We're supposed to have teachers teaching us stuff like this so that we cannot conquer this. Let me ask you this, and I'll bring this up next week, okay? But I just want you to say something for you to think about when you go home and you can read it. What is the greatest thing you can manifest?
Love.
Love. Is love an emotion?
Yes.
Describe it for me.
Passion.
Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13.
Love is very patient and kind.
1 Corinthians chapter 13. He said you can do this, you can move mountains, you can give your body to the flames, but if you don't have control of your emotions, you're not achieving anything. Love is a person, of course. We call him love because of the control he has over his mercy and grace and compassion. But God's love is emotion, his activity harnessed by his knowledge and his will. It's grace flowing down through emotion. That's what emotion is. That's what love is. Love is the expression. Love has two hands, compassion and mercy, which is the grace of God. And it flows, God's grace flows through his emotion. So when Jesus told the disciples, I'm going to give you a commandment, what was the commandment he gave them? Right? Love. By this shall all men know. Well, what is love? Somebody read 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4.
Love is very patient and kind, never jealous or envious, never boastful or proud, never haughty or selfish or rude. Love does not demand its own way, it is not irritable or touchy, it is never glad about injustice, but always rejoices when the truth wins out. If you love someone, you'll be loyal to him no matter what the cost. You will always believe in him, always expect the best of him, and always stand your ground in defending him. Living Bible.
Can you say it in Latin? Anybody say it in Latin? That was a Living Bible. Well done. That's very impressive. Anybody got another version? The Amplified's great. I love the Amplified for this. But everything you're talking about, everything you just recited there is all emotion. It's all emotion.
Is that 13?
So,
It was so quick that I...
you didn't catch it. So what version are you reading?
Well, what is it, 13?
1 Corinthians 13 and verse 4. 4, 5.
Verse 4?
Yeah.
Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others or other. It is not dishonest. It is not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs.
Keep going.
Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, it always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies,
They will pass. Yeah. No, it's okay.
where there are tongues, there will be still. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we would know in part, and we prophesy in part.
But now we look through a glass darkly. And, okay, I don't need to read that. But what I was trying to get you to see was, love are all these emotions correctly harnessed. That's why Jesus said, this will separate you from everybody. Everybody will know you're different from everybody else. Not because you move mountains, not because you speak in tongues and the tongues of men and angels. That doesn't distinguish you. That is not the defining difference between you and everybody else. The definitive difference between you and everybody else is your ability to harness your emotion that expresses your will, which is governed by your understanding and knowledge and revelation of what God has done. And it puts you in control of you and everything around you. You're not in charge of the things around you, but then they can't change you like they may change others because you're in charge of you.